Hi everyone, my name is Hennessy from PG29 and this is my video presentation on the Risk Management Plan Review. So for today's review I will be going through the good parts of the Risk Management Plan, the not so good parts, and finally final thoughts and suggestions for improving the document. So firstly the good. Responsibility allocation in general is fairly well implemented. There is a section on how to identify risks, which is good, as well as how to monitor the risks going forward. Risk categorization is well defined and reasonable, and the risk management plans that have been mentioned are also good and well defined. There are several risks identified, and the list may or may not be expanded on, but in general seems quite good. And the key risk elements are mentioned as well. These include probability, impact, and risk indicators. Risk ownership is part of the responsibility allocation section. However, it's slightly different, and this is mentioned occasionally as well. Risk probabilities are defined in the document, which is good, as well as the critical control methods in the risk mitigation strategy section. There's also a risk monitoring and review process in the document. Now, what was not so good? The responsibility allocation does need to be more detailed. So most of the risks will mention either the project manager or a particular team member. However, some risks will apply to the whole team, and some risks don't mention anyone who's responsible at all. There should be at least one person who will be responsible for overseeing the mitigation of a particular risk. Missing from the document is how to record and escalate risks. This is important because if a risk is encountered by a particular team member, they might not know how to report on this risk and escalate it to the relevant person so that the risk strategy can be implemented. A communication plan as well needs to be included into the document. This is important because the rules and ways that the risks can be escalated need to be mentioned to every team member. In such a small team, it may be obvious that each team member will be informing every other team member if a risk is encountered. However, even if this is the case, this should be mentioned somewhere in the document. Some risks will have acceptable risk levels, and nowhere on the document is this mentioned. And many of the risks either have a contingency plan or a mitigation strategy. Ideally, most risks will have an avoidance strategy, a mitigation strategy, as well as a contingency plan for the very high priority risks. Missing from the document as well are the root causes and effects on project objectives. This is helpful for team members to identify how a particular risk may affect them. Nowhere in the document is there mentioned the stakeholders for particular risks. This is important so we know how the risks will affect particular people or organizations. This may be the team, it may be a project deliverable, or it may be an organization or the client. Risk priority isn't mentioned either, so even though probability and impact is detailed into the document, priorities for risks are important in the event that multiple risk mitigation strategies need to be implemented. We need to know which strategies to implement first. Finally, the monitoring and review plan is not integrated into the full planning, identification, and analysis of new risks in the document. So my final thoughts and suggestions. Each risk should have a section that details the risk ownership or allocation. And this may include supporting allocations as well, so not just one team member will be responsible for a particular risk. There needs to be a section for reporting and escalation process, as well as a section for the communication plan. Each risk as well should have priority added to it, and an acceptable risk level if appropriate, and these need to be put into the document convention section as well. The risk control strategies need to be elaborated on. So again, this will include mitigation, avoidance, the contingency plans, or if not necessary, explain why it isn't necessary. Root causes and key stakeholders need to be identified for all the risks as well, and a section in the review process on how to integrate the review process into the full management plan needs to be implemented. So that's the end of the presentation. Hopefully these strategies are helpful for us to improve the document for the final presentation. Thank you.